Ah, that is Amaka, 30 years old and still no husband. Ndibieni, what is this world turning into? I heard she's still going to school. At 30 years old, which man will now marry a woman who is busy reading books instead of learning how to cook for a husband? Maybe the books will marry her then. Ha! Even her mates from secondary school have children in primary school now.
In Umudioka, a close-knit neighborhood in Onitsha, Anambra State, a woman's worth was measured by one thing above all others: marriage. It did not matter if you had a certificate. It did not matter if you had ambition. If you were unmarried past 25, you were treated as a cautionary tale, whispered about in market stalls and after church gatherings, held up as proof that something must be wrong with you. Amaka Okonkwo, at 30 years old, had become the neighborhood's favorite subject of pity and mockery. Every Sunday after church, every market day, every naming ceremony or wedding she attended, someone would find a way to remind her of what she did not have: a husband, children, a settled life. But what the neighborhood failed to see, what they refused to see, was that Amaka was not idle. She was not waiting helplessly for a man to rescue her from spinsterhood. She was building something far more valuable than what they could imagine, herself. Amaka had grown up watching her mother, Mama Ijeoma, struggle silently in a marriage that had drained her of every ounce of independence. Her father, though not a cruel man, controlled every aspect of the household finances, leaving her mother with no voice, no savings of her own, and no options when things became difficult. At 16 years old, Amaka made herself a promise. She would never enter marriage empty-handed. She would never be a woman who needed to ask permission for her own survival. Before she gave her heart to any man, she would first secure her mind, her finances, and her independence. That promise would guide every decision she made for the next 14 years, even when the entire neighborhood mocked her for it. While her mates were attending Owambe parties, searching for husbands, and posting engagement photos on social media, Amaka spent her 20s in a different kind of pursuit. She completed her first degree in microbiology at Nnamdi Azikiwe University, graduating with a second-class upper. But she did not stop there. She proceeded to earn her master's degree while working a full-time laboratory technician job to fund her education. Her colleagues at the hospital laboratory where she worked often asked her the same tired question. Colleague once asked Amaka, "When are you going to rest and find a husband? All this schooling, will it cook for you at night?" Amaka responded, "My husband will meet a complete woman, not a woman still figuring herself out. I am not in a hurry." Amaka's response never wavered, no matter how many times the question was asked. She understood something that many around her did not: that building a life was not a race against a clock, but a careful construction that required patience. Alongside her academic pursuits, Amaka noticed a gap in her community. Quality skincare and wellness products were either unavailable locally or prohibitively expensive, imported and marked up beyond what most working-class Nigerian women could afford. Using her background in microbiology, Amaka began formulating her own natural skincare line in her small rented room, testing formulations late into the night after her laboratory shifts ended. She called her brand Adaeze Naturals, named after her grandmother, who had taught her as a child about the healing properties of local herbs and plants long before Amaka understood the science behind them. Progress was slow at first. She sold products from a small table at Ochanja Market on weekends, reinvesting every kobo of profit back into the business, rather than spending on herself. While her age mates spent money on elaborate hairstyles and designer bags to attract suitors, Amaka wore simple clothes and channeled every available naira into raw materials, packaging, and eventually, her PhD program. The mockery from the neighborhood only intensified as the years passed. At 26, they called her too proud. At 28, they called her cursed. By 30, they had settled on calling her the neighborhood failure, a label meant to wound, thrown carelessly by people who had never once asked Amaka what she was actually building. Even Amaka's own relatives added to the pressure. Her aunties would pull her aside at family gatherings, their voices heavy with concern, disguised as criticism. Auntie Obiageli said, "Amaka, my dear, time is not our friend as women. You cannot keep chasing certificates forever. What will all this schooling do for you if you end up alone?" Amaka responded, "Auntie, I hear you. But I would rather build myself completely first than rush into something I am not ready for. If God has a good man for me, he will still be there when I am ready." These conversations happened again and again, year after year, and each time, Amaka remained gracious but unmoved from her path. By the time Amaka turned 29, the seeds she had planted for over a decade began to sprout in ways even she had not fully anticipated. Adaeze Naturals had grown from a small table at Ochanja Market into a registered company with its own small production facility in Onitsha, supplying skincare products to retail shops across 3 states: Anambra, Delta, and Imo. That same year, Amaka successfully defended her PhD thesis in microbiology, focusing her research on antimicrobial properties of indigenous Nigerian plants, research that would later be published in an international scientific journal and cited by researchers across West Africa. Dr. Amaka Okonkwo. The title felt surreal even to her, a woman who had once been dismissed by her own neighborhood as someone who would amount to nothing without a husband. Adaeze Naturals continued its explosive growth. Within 18 months, the company had secured contracts with major pharmacy chains across southeast Nigeria. Amaka's annual revenue crossed 150 million naira, making her one of the youngest self-made female entrepreneurs in Anambra State's growing wellness industry. With her PhD secured and her financial independence firmly established, Amaka finally allowed herself to consider what she had deliberately set aside for over a decade: love and marriage. But this time, she would not be entering that chapter as a desperate woman seeking validation. She would enter it as a complete woman, choosing a partner rather than searching for a rescuer. It was at that very conference, a gathering of Nigeria's top entrepreneurs and business leaders, that Amaka met barrister Kelechi Nwosu, a highly respected corporate lawyer from Owerri, widely considered one of the most eligible bachelors in the entire Southeast, known not just for his wealth, but for his integrity and genuine respect for accomplished women. Kelechi had been approached by countless women over the years, many pursuing him for his wealth and status. But something about Amaka was different. She did not fawn over him. She engaged him in genuine conversation about business strategy, about her research, about her vision for expanding access to affordable wellness products across Nigeria. If you have ever been told you are running out of time, if you have ever been mocked for choosing to build yourself before building a home with someone else, I need you to subscribe to this channel right now. Because what happens between Amaka and Kelechi next will prove something that every woman deserves to hear. The right timing is not society's timing, it is yours. Kelechi found himself captivated, not by Amaka's beauty alone, though she was undeniably beautiful, but by the depth of her mind, the strength of her spirit, and the quiet confidence that came from a woman who had built her own empire brick by brick. I have met many women in my line of work, Dr. Okonkwo, but I have never met someone who speaks about her business with this much passion and precision. Tell me, how does a woman build all of this by herself? Amaka responded, "One decision at a time, barrister. I simply refuse to let anyone else's timeline become mine." That single conversation led to a phone call the following week. That phone call led to dinner in Lagos. And within 8 months of careful, deliberate courtship, the kind built on genuine friendship and mutual respect rather than desperation, Kelechi proposed. Their traditional wedding, held in Onitsha, became the talk of the entire state. It was not a wedding built on urgency or relief, that someone had finally married her. It was a celebration of 2 accomplished, secure individuals choosing to build a life together as equals. Among the guests seated in the crowd were Mama Chidinma and Mama Uchechi, the same women who had once laughed at Amaka on that quiet Sunday afternoon, years earlier. They sat watching, their faces carefully arranged into polite smiles, unable to hide the discomfort of watching the woman they had mocked marry into one of the most respected families in the southeast. But the true harvest of Amaka's patience was not simply the wedding itself, it was everything that followed. While Amaka had spent her 20s building, many of her age mates had spent those same years rushing into marriages to escape the neighborhood's mockery, rushing into motherhood before they had discovered who they even were as individuals. Ngozi, one of Amaka's childhood friends, had married at 22, simply to silence her family's constant pressure. By the time she turned 30, she found herself trapped in a home where her husband controlled every decision, every naira, every aspect of her existence, much like Amaka's own mother had experienced. Ngozi had 3 children she loved deeply, but she had lost every trace of the ambitious young woman she once was. Chidinma, the daughter of Mama Chidinma herself, had married at 24 to a man who seemed perfect on the surface. But behind closed doors, the marriage had become a source of constant torment, verbal abuse, financial control, isolation from her own family. By the time she turned 29, Chidinma had packed her belongings and returned to her mother's compound, her marriage in ruins, forced to start rebuilding her life from nothing, now with 2 children to raise alone. These were not isolated stories. Across Umudioka and countless neighborhoods like it, the pattern repeated itself again and again. Women who had rushed into marriage simply to avoid social mockery often found themselves trapped, unfulfilled, or eventually starting over completely, all while Amaka, once mocked as the neighborhood failure, built a marriage founded on genuine partnership, mutual respect, and financial security she had created entirely on her own terms. There is an old saying that Amaka herself would often repeat to young women who sought her guidance in later years. True success isn't about finishing first, it's about finishing right. She had watched this truth play out in real time, among the very people who had once measured her worth by a wedding ring she did not yet wear. Amaka did not gloat. She did not seek revenge against those who had mocked her. Instead, when Ngozi eventually confided in her about the pain of her marriage, Amaka simply listened, offered support, and eventually helped her old friend secure a small loan to start her own tailoring business. The same quiet, patient support that had once built her own empire. 5 years after her wedding, Amaka's life stood as living proof that patience, when paired with relentless effort, always eventually bears fruit. Adaeze Naturals had expanded into a nationally recognized wellness brand, now distributed in over 200 retail locations across Nigeria, with export operations beginning into neighboring West African countries. Her marriage to Kelechi had produced 2 beautiful children, but more importantly, it remained a genuine partnership, one where both individuals had entered as complete, secure people, rather than 2 halves desperately searching for wholeness in each other. Perhaps the most powerful symbol of Amaka's journey was the modest 3-bedroom bungalow she purchased for her parents in their final years. Not a grand mansion built to impress, but a comfortable, dignified home built from the profits of the very education and business the neighborhood had once mocked her for pursuing. Her mother, Mama Ijeoma, who had spent decades in financial dependency, finally experienced true comfort and security in her final years, courtesy of the daughter who had refused to repeat her mother's story. Today, the very women who once gathered under that mango tree to mock Amaka's unmarried status now speak of her with a very different tone, one heavy with quiet envy and unmistakable regret. Mama Uchechi has been overheard telling her own daughter, "You should have followed Amaka's path. Build yourself first. I was wrong to have rushed you into marriage so quickly." If Amaka's story has spoken to something deep within you, if you have ever felt pressured to rush your own timeline just to satisfy other people's expectations, subscribe to this channel right now. We tell stories about women who refuse to be defined by society's clock, because somewhere out there, someone needs permission to build themselves first, and to trust that the right blessings will arrive exactly when they are ready to receive them. This is the story of Dr. Amaka Okonkwo, a woman once mocked as the neighborhood failure for refusing to marry before she was ready. A woman who chose books over gossip, patience over pressure, and self-investment over societal validation. She proved, in the most undeniable way possible, that a woman's timeline belongs to no one but herself. If you are the Amaka in your own story right now, if you are being mocked for choosing your education, your career, or your peace over rushing into a relationship you are not ready for, I want you to know something. Your season of building is not wasted time. It is the very foundation upon which your future happiness will stand. True success isn't about finishing first. It's about finishing right. This is She Refused to Marry at 30. Thank you for watching. May Amaka's patience remind you that the timeline that matters most is the one you set for yourself.